The S&P 500 just climbed 10% in one day. Let that sink in for a second. Look at this candle here on ES. This is an insane day. I've never experienced a trading day like this. And I said it in the Sunday video. I had never seen volatility like we saw on Friday and then again on Monday. And this just made this time period even more insane. Incredible move to the upside. Not only that, there was a lot of call activity right before the news came in that tariffs were paused for 90 days. And not just any call activity, 0 day to expiration call activity, which was posted on the Twitter account earlier today. And I'll have to scroll down with a lot of the flow that you can see on here. But if I scroll all the way down to early morning, we can see that there was some highly unusual call flow. Specifically, both of these orders, and there was a lot more premium into it as well, as we'll see later, but a $500,000 order and $768,000 order for about 1.2 million total. Now, they bought the 510 strike on both of these, and this was at the price of $497 on SPY at the time. Well, if I go back to SPY over here, we closed at $548. So I'm going to go down to the 15-minute to show you. But basically, I was looking at a couple levels, as you can see on here. They were adding all the way back where this blue arrow is over here. And then we had an explosion to the upside afterwards. Now, when they added these calls, you can see the time over here. It was 12:11 Eastern and 12:10 Eastern. Again, 0 day to expiration. So we can go back to the time period that they did add these. And you can see it was right around where this spiked up here. So they were able to get a very nice spike to the upside. And also, if you follow the Twitter account, you notice that they sold the majority of their calls into this spike intraday. So I'll get rid of this blue arrow and just show you they were able to sell for a 75% and even up to a little over 100% profit into this spike. And what's crazy is it continued to run afterwards. So they were able to nail the local bottom before it went 100%. And then runners of that position were able to go, who even knows how far. Now you can see on here, those calls ended up going well over 3,000% just today alone. Very unlikely they were holding throughout the entirety of that move, but just incredible trade. Like this is the trade of the year so far, at least that I've seen based on flow. And you can see was alerted, power alert, 3,860% by end of day. I've never seen anything like that. That is not typical with power alerts. I have to clarify that, but occasionally you'll see some of these highly unusual orders go through and it ends up very successful. Today was one of those days, just like incredible trade that they had here. And obviously there was that benefit of the news, and very likely they knew the news beforehand, but we can hate on it all we want, or we can look at the flow and find insight from it. So incredible day overall, especially for these whales and anybody that saw those orders when it was posted on the Twitter account. So outside of that, I do want to mention just my thoughts going forward, because this is just an insane shift to where the trend was before. We actually blew through one of my levels, which was 532.73, and closed above it today. So going forward, this is actually the level that I want to see defended in the near term. First of all, 513.92 is critical to get above. I believe that there would be continuation to 532 from here, and we saw that almost instantaneously today just because of that news. And then we're all the way back up above 532.73. So as long as this can hold this range over here, you can see it actually held pretty nicely intraday. This is something that can continue in the short term. And where do I want it to continue to? Well, go to SPX over here, because it almost tested it earlier today. I want to see how it will react to this trend line over here, this blue trend line. And I'll show you where the pivot is to start it, all the way back here in April of 2024. So about a year ago. And you can see the August 5th low acts as a nice pivot low. We actually retested it before the crash back over here, and we had a nice 3-day bounce. So this is my target in the near term. Obviously, we're very close to it, but in order for bulls to take the reins again and get this out of this crashy correction phase, we need to get above 5,510 roughly, which is just about where this trend line is. If bulls can do that, they're going to have a much easier time going back to retest where the previous range is. And remember, I spoke about this in many videos now. This range, this distribution range, the lower end is 5,778, which is exactly where we rejected before the crash started. So if we can get above over here where I have circled this trend line around 5,510, that brings upside opportunity, and I'll draw it for you to retest 5,778 again. If this retests, there's a couple options from there. And this is actually my base case at the moment, especially considering how strong this rally has been so far. If we can reclaim 5,510, which I believe is very possible, then we can see that 5,778 next. Once this retests, there's two options. One is a rejection and a retest of the trend line. Not only would it be pretty standard to see a rejection of such a critical resistance, but this also would provide it another retest of a key trend line. Plus, there's actually an inverse head and shoulder that would form off of it. Now, I'm not going to try to predict that we'll have an inverse head and shoulder, but I see this as a likely path. This is very doable, especially after how strong of a reversal we saw today. If this is the case, that'd be very bullish. There's upside potential to 5,778, obviously within the short term if this path comes to fruition, but also if maybe you even missed the low from today or these lows that formed and you don't want to chase, there's a potential to add on if it decides to create that inverse head and shoulder. That'd be very bullish, especially coming out of this pretty macro correction that went all the way down negative 21% this year. And that would be a nice buying opportunity for it to finally break and reclaim the range, which would be very bullish. So this is kind of what I'm looking at the moment. Obviously, all of it is contingent that we're able to reclaim 5,510. But like I said, the strength of today's candle, 10% in a day, ridiculous. Haven't seen a day like that since 2008. This is something that will provide a lot of momentum to the market, and we can see something like this happen. So watch this. I'm pretty confident that something like this could come to fruition, which would mean, again, a lot of opportunity in the near term, as well as potentially even longer term if this inverse head and shoulder plays out. So I'll be watching for something like that this week. And then also I'll be watching Tesla because it is retesting or almost close to retesting its own uptrend similar to the S&P 500. And I'll get rid of some of these lines here so you can see it a bit easier. But this blue line over here is a key uptrend. You can see it goes all the way down to, yet again, April of 2024. This low that formed has been retested a couple times, 1, 2, 3, and then rejected over here, 4 and 5. So 5 key retests, and either it created a nice bounce or a nice rejection from it. And we're nearing it again. I believe this will be more favorable to bulls on a third test. Typically that is the case for a triple top. You have a breakthrough. So if we do retest this, which by the way, it went up 22.69% today. That is crazy. But if we do retest this and can reclaim it, this is something that can shoot much higher. Like I'm talking high 300s afterwards. So I am watching this one. There's also a nice downtrend. This is something that can be very tradable, especially if momentum persists in the market. But we can see over here, look at where it closed today. No surprises there, right on this trend line, because as you can see, I got to optimize this a bit more. But you can see rejected end of day and closed right about on that trend line. If it does cross above, that can help promote an upside to around 290. Above 290 is where this thing flies. And we see that rally, some unfinished business to where attempted beforehand over here with these rejections. So that's what I'm looking for in the near term. Flow has been very supportive all day as well as all week. Oddly enough, we saw a lot of bullish flow throughout the entirety of the week, even when we were in that crash mode Monday and Tuesday. So you can see over here, a decent amount of call orders. Some of them, if I scroll a bit higher, like 1.3 million for the 500 strike are really far out the money. This expires in about 9 months from now, 8 months from now. So this is a very aggressive order for a decent amount of premium. Good to see that, at least if you're bullish. 1 million over here, a little bit in the money for May. So some of these orders are good as a complement for that upside move. Of course, we'd like to continue to see a lot more of these, especially continuous sweepers, kind of like what we've seen in the past with Tesla, with NVIDIA, etc. Always want to see those continuous orders. So I will be checking for that. But then also want to make sure it can fit my technical criteria as well. But insane move today. And then last thing that I do want to mention, I typically don't talk about crypto, but I kind of have to today because this is something that also tested its own uptrend, believe it or not. I have to go to this chart over here. I have a couple different charts for it. But a lot of uptrends getting retested, a lot of breakdowns that originally happened, but now it's reclaiming an uptrend. And you can see here a couple things. One, from back in August, we have a pivot that started and this uptrend began. We have a couple tests over here, retest, and then most recently it attempted to fall below, but it's now gotten picked up based on today. So we're back above this uptrend. If it can hold this is something that can go back to all-time highs, believe it or not. So I'm not someone that is a perma bull, even though maybe some of you that are new to the channel might think that. I've had plenty of short opportunities in the past, like 2022. I just don't see that to be the case, especially with market momentum lately. for the past year and a half or so, especially since October of 2023. But so far, it's held this uptrend. And as long as it continues to hold that, especially the current low around 76,000, I'd say that's a good risk level. This is something that can perform very well if the market continues with its momentum. So I'm looking for this right here, a nice downtrend forming as well. So Bitcoin, potential opportunity for a lot more upside, like 112,000 plus. And of course, if Bitcoin benefits, then coin would as well. So this is something that I'll be watching for. Not a pretty downtrend, but coin technical analysis is a bit odd since it follows both NASDAQ as well as Bitcoin predominantly. So you can see over here, we did technically break out of a downtrend today. If for whatever reason we have a retest, that is a buying opportunity in my opinion. You can see over here how a retest would look, but down to like 164 and pop, that'd be great. Otherwise, if it just decides to keep gapping up and keep up with the momentum, we can see that continuation a lot higher. So that's just what I'm looking at right now. It would be great to see complementing flow. I actually didn't look at flow today. So at 270, strike is not bad at all for an opening order. You can see vol is over the open interest, 1 million in premium. And then this one was a leap order though. So would prefer to see some more shorter dated ones to complement this setup, but crypto looks bullish to me at the moment as well. Want to see these levels hold like that uptrend as well as S&P 500's uptrend. If it can do that, we can see it fly a lot further. Otherwise, insane markets lately. Hope you guys are benefiting on the volatility. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.